Hello, and welcome to the Flix Forum Podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode, we're going a little bit out of order with a very special episode on the 2021 teen horror film Fear Street Part 3, 1666. This is directed by Leigh Janiak. It stars Kiana Madeira, Ashley Zuckerman, Gillian Jacobs, Olivia Scott Welch, Benjamin Flores Jr, Darrell Britt-Gibson, Sadie Sink, Emily Rudd, McCabe Slye, Julia Rehwald, Fred Hechinger, Jordana Spiro, and Jordyn DiNatale, as well as Ted Sutherland, if I didn't already say his name. I am Jesse, and I am here for our third and final recap of this Fear Street trilogy that Netflix have been putting out over the last 3 weeks. Thank you for joining me and keeping me company. I do recommend that if you are interested in this Fear Street trilogy, that you go back and check out Part 1 and Part 2, which have already come out on Netflix, as well as our bonus podcast on the Flix Forum. I'm going to be spoiling this whole trilogy in this quick little brief chat. So if you were interested in seeing these films, please give us a pause. Come back a little bit later on, because this is going to be giving away the whole story, I guess, of the 3 films. So we always start off our show with a fast flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film's about. And this one, it's a step back in time to 1666 to reveal the true meaning behind the Shady Side curse, in the hope that it can be broken in our 1994 timeline. So if you've seen the films, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it might be a little bit confusing, but I'm guessing most of you wouldn't be jumping in for Part 3 if you hadn't seen the previous 2 parts. Now, just like the other films, I did do a little bit more of an in-depth look at how this one was put together in the first part episode, but realistically, it's based on the R.L. Stine Fear Street series. It was meant to be released theatrically by Fox. COVID hit, wasn't released. Disney bought Fox, sold it to Netflix, and that's how we've got it here on Netflix. And this is obviously the final part in the trilogy. It was released on the 16th of July 2021, and obviously Part 1 and Part 2 were released in the weeks prior. Although this is the third film in the trilogy, it was filmed second after Part 1, before Part 2, and it makes sense once you've seen the films now that a majority of the characters from Part 1 are playing characters in the past in Part 3, so a very cool and creepy way to sort of tie this all together, and would have been a lot easier to keep the cast and crew together from the first to the third, because there's so much overlay of these actors and actresses playing these characters. I think the interesting thing with this one is I think that R.L. Stine actually visited the set for this one while they were filming it, so it's got his tick of approval on this film. Consensus time. This is where we have a look at what people around the world are saying, and critics and people just like myself out there giving it a rating. We start off with Rotten Tomatoes, where this one, it's up 5% on the second one, and it sits at 94% from critics. That's on 51 reviews, so this is fresh, which is 94% is pretty high. The audience on Rotten Tomatoes has it on 85%. That's on a bit over 100 reviews, so again, quite high. And the same on our other platforms that we look at. So on IMDb, it's sitting on about a 6.8 at the time of recording this, and on Letterboxd sits at a 3.7 out of 5, and I think these numbers are fluctuating as we speak, going up and up and up with the amount of people who are actually tuning in for the third and final part of this trilogy. My early thoughts for this one. So this it's a bit of a weird take, because obviously we've seen the first one was set in the 90s and sort of, looked at the way that Scream was made and showed a little bit of 90s horror films. And the second one, again, was set in the 70s, so it took on things like Friday the 13th and those sorts of teen films that are set in the woods. And this one, again, it's sort of it's a cross between, I guess, The Crucible with Winona Ryder, if you've seen that, and The Witch, the recent sort of film that goes back in this time and looks in the past, and this does sort of come back around towards the end. I've already said I'm going to spoil this, and it ties everything together really nicely. Very, very well done, realistically, that they've been able to go back in time and tell a story that's gone across multiple generations. So I appreciated that from the get-go. Character time. We'll talk about some characters in this one, and I'm going to mainly focus on the characters in the 1666 part, because we've discussed the others in the first episode from 1994, and we do get to see them at the end back at, I guess they called it Part 2 of the 1994 film, but like I mentioned before, the characters that we see early on, they're played by the same actors and actresses in this part as different characters, so Dee from the 1990s version, she's Sarah Fear in this one. Spelled F-I-E-R, but obviously a little bit of a play on words with Fear Street. And she plays this character in this one where she's a young girl who's going to be married off to this guy called Solomon, and he's much older than her, obviously a reflection of the times, and she comes across as this rebellious teenager that, really just wants to be a kid. She likes to stand up for herself, and in doing this creates enemies and people accusing her of obviously being a witch because she's different, and different from the mold of what people want to say. And I guess that, this is a common theme that we see in teen sorts of films. In this one, again, she's... So in the 90s version, we see that Dee has a partner, Sam, the lesbian couple, and in this one, so we see Sarah has feelings towards this character called Hannah, and Hannah is the same character as Sam, and in this one, she's the pastor's daughter, obviously well respected in the community. Her mother doesn't want her to be seen with Sarah because she has this suspicion that they have feelings for each other, and obviously at that time, like I mentioned before, not really accepted in society, and this sort of plays out and leads to the two being accused of being witches, and we see other characters throughout playing from the first film, playing different characters in this one as well. The brother, Josh, plays the brother of Sarah in this one, called Henry. And I think the big one that you need to talk about is Solomon Good, who is the counter piece of Nick, the sheriff or the police officer that we're seeing. And this Solomon guy comes across at the start as a decent man. And as an audience member, I really wanted to trust him. And I thought that what he was doing was right. And then obviously there's a bit of a twist, which was done quite timely, I guess, because as an audience, you work out quickly that Sarah's not actually a witch. And they answered this question very, very quickly, where you understand that Solomon and the family lineage of these people have felt harshly done by. And Solomon, I guess his greed overwhelms him from the despair of being a part of this union town, which later becomes Shadyside. And he kicks off this whole curse. So it's revealed finally, we understand where all these villains have come throughout the ages. It's because of them trying to keep the family name in the good side of town and to ensure that they have a good life, I guess. And that's where we're at with this one, and without trying to give away too much of the plot. And we've spoken about the director, Leigh Janiak, directed all of these films. Time to talk a little bit about some scenes in this one, 1666, that stood out. And again, spoilers, but there's a scene where the curse starts to overtake this town, and the pastor locks himself in the church with a whole bunch of kids, and they break in. Solomon breaks in, and you see the pastor up on the lectern, and all these kids are sitting in the pews, and they've had their eyes taken out. And this was just a big shock for me. I was like, wow, like some very graphic killings and gore in this one, as well as the previous films in this series too. Again, there's another Stephen King reference, which really tickled my fancy. They decided to bring up the Carrie reference again, and they managed to get a big bucket of blood and pour it over Nick Good's head, which I just really, really liked. And finally, this is right at the end of the film, we see that everything comes together in this film, and Dee and Sam are finally together. They're kissing, and the camera sort of high angle reverses out of there over the two of them, and sort of goes on this bit of a journey throughout the credits as the credits intertwine, and we see that the camera goes back into this underground area where we've spent a bit of part over these films, and the book of spells is still sitting there, and we see a hand quickly grab that book and sort of run off. And obviously it's nice to see that they've left this open just enough in case this series is successful and they want to continue on and do another story in this Fear Street series, which could be quite nice. There's only one thing that sort of was a little bit nosy for me in this one, and it's towards the end. We've got the good characters coming together, Christine and or Ziggy, as well as Dee and her brother Josh, and Martin, who I will talk a little bit about later on. They're all inside the shopping mall around this tree where everything's happened, and Dee does this pep talk, I guess, to get them all on board and explain the importance of why they're doing what they're doing and how they should be doing it. And it was just so lame. so lame. But apart from that, this film sits pretty well with me, especially with some of the themes and ideas in this one. And they continue on a little bit from the second one. This idea of Shadyside as or the socio-economic lower class that they are, that, you know, they're a curse. A curse is that poverty's a curse, and the trauma of being involved in poverty, and how these characters are trying to overcome it, not just for themselves, but hopefully for those around them as well. I thoroughly enjoyed the commentary on same-sex couples throughout this film. It's been done in such a positive light, and, you know, it's just nice to see it not shut down for a change, and I think they've done it in such a good way. This one too is a little bit more about greed, especially through the character of Solomon, and it highlights this family line that Nick's a part of as well, that they do this really well in the 1666 setting of rottenness, and you see fruits becoming rotten, and you see pigs going crazy and eating their children, and the water well being poisoned, and all these things of, you know, if you do become too greedy, not everything's going to be nice for you, and I did like that. And finally, this idea of innocence too. Hannah and Sarah, it didn't matter if they were witches or if they weren't witches. They were accused and brought to trial without any real evidence, and that's a whole thing that teens feel, that they're always in trouble, or they're always being told off for things they're doing, and you know, sometimes they are just innocent. They're not necessarily doing the wrong thing, and it was just nice to see that in this film too. So what did we take away from this, and what are my final thoughts, or not quite my final thoughts, but what am I thinking from this? And I think that it's really hard sometimes in a trilogy to tie everything together really nicely over 3 films. And there's a lot more pressure on this film than usual trilogy, because usually you have years or 12 months break in between to break up and give audiences time to sit and dwell over what's going on. But these previous films are so fresh in your mind because they've only come out, you know, weeks prior. It was really crucial that they got this right, and they should be really proud that they did that. You know, we have 3 films released over 3 weeks, and there were very little letdowns, and I really liked that. I think that was good. I've been talking about some questions that I was hoping were going to be answered over the progress of these 3 films, and I'm pretty satisfied with where we've gone. And I think I started off talking about the adults in this world, and, you know, the first 2 films, there were very few adults in the world, and there were a lot more in this 1666 world. We saw Solomon, and we saw the pastor and his wife, and Crazy Thomas, and a lot more adults in this one than we have in the previous ones. And I think that they've done that well to hold it off to the last one, because this sort of gives this commentary on society as we've moved forward, and that, you know, previously in the past, parents played a big role, or adults played a big role in the bringing up of kids, and maybe they need to take more of a role. Maybe we need to reflect back on those times and be like, hey, time to step up and be there to support our kids. And I don't know if that's just me taking that out, but I really liked that. I think I referred, and this is another part, I think I referred to him as Urkel. I'm not sure why, but Martin, we hear these names, Martin. This is the dude that gave Josh the business card, and I think he comes across as another victim of Good's poor policing, and he's there at the end to help take down these bad people, and I liked that we got that closure for his character too. It wasn't just put out there as a red herring that wasn't sort of solved, so that was good too. I asked as well about these clocks in Christine's house, or Ziggy's house. This is probably one of the things that let me down. I would have liked a shot of her ripping them all down or throwing them all out, because now that this curse has been lifted, she doesn't need them in that house anymore, no matter what they were there for, but she does not need them anymore. So it would have been nice to see them all disappear. And obviously last week I did have a big question about what's so special about Nick's family, and this was definitely revealed. I've already gone into it bits and pieces, but well and truly revealed in this one. And that big pumping organ that was in that den, and I think it's just that symbol of evil working throughout the town, and obviously that is destroyed at the end of the film, which was nice. So I'm satisfied. I'm very satisfied. I hope you guys are too. I hope that this trilogy has been a nice little thing to keep you going week by week over the last few weeks. For me, I'm going to finalize this and bring it all together. And like I've mentioned before, this does a really good job at answering all the questions, closes all the plot holes, and it brings together a pretty engaging trilogy. The performances throughout this, were really good because they kept it from turning into like this B-grade series. Everyone involved should be proud. There are certain scenes that could go completely haywire or be interpreted as really corny. And I think that at times, yes, that does happen, but without the cast that they had in this, it could have got a lot worse. The reverse storytelling as well, it really worked, and it gives this trilogy a point of difference in a very overcrowded market of these types of films. So well done all around. I'm very, very close to being this is the conclusion to a trilogy. Do I need to bump it up a bit higher? But I'm going to keep it at a 3.5 out of 5 and a really solid closure for this trilogy of films, which I've enjoyed and I hope you have as well. If you have enjoyed what we've been talking about with these films, please do go back and check out some of our other episodes in our catalogue. We've got over 150 Netflix original films that have been covered on this podcast. So feel free to Google search us, find us, see if there's any that you've seen, and have a listen to our take on some of these films too. If you've got social media, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a tweet, give us a retweet, whatever you can. The question I want to put out there to socials this week is, what's your favourite trilogy of films? Do you have an all-time favourite? Is it like the Godfather series or Lord of the Rings? The Back to the Future trilogy as well? There are so many good trilogies out there. What is one of your all-time favourite trilogies of films? I'd like to say thanks again for keeping me company. I hope you've enjoyed this. Obviously, keep our ear out on a Wednesday for our regular programming, which will be returning, and stay safe.